Um, we're excited to be back to introduce this next session. It provides a taste of the sprawling ecosystem that you heard about this morning, that team sport of partners that are coalescing around the skills and credential policy space. From my position at the NGA Center, I am looking across this ecosystem and trying to discern all of the moving parts and the key players in order to curate this policy conversation for state leaders. This next session is a great cross-section of the range of expert voices that we are engaging that support this work in states. I mentioned earlier that in this meeting, we are only able to skim the surface of this topic. So while each of these experts could easily cover an hour on their work, over the next 50 minutes, we're gonna fly through some focused presentations. We'll begin the session by hearing from Maurice Jones, the CEO of OneTen, which you've heard about from a few speakers already this morning. They are a coalition bringing together business leaders committed to upskilling, hiring, and promoting 1 million Black Americans over the next 10 years into family-sustaining jobs with opportunities for advancement. Then we will transition to hearing from an organization that is actively collaborating with us and with several states to bring transparency and literacy to the credentialing marketplace through data and technology solutions, Credential Engine. We're delighted to have Deb Everhart with us today to dive into this critical work. Then we'll transition over to Kathleen deLaski, the CEO of Education Design Lab. The lab has supported some 125 colleges, as well as employers and high school districts and regions in their move towards a skills-based economy. Finally, we'll wrap up this session with an armchair conversation between Alex Kaplan, global leader at IBM Credentials, and a federal partner, Boris, Director of Credentialing and Skill Bridge Programs within Professional Military Education at the U.S. Department of Defense. Together, they will explore the interplay between state and federal skills work. It's going to be a great session, so I'll stop talking now and get out of the way. It's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Maurice Jones from OneTen.
Well, good afternoon, maybe good morning, depending on where you are. And I'm delighted to be chatting with you. I'm Maurice with OneTen. And I want to spend 10 minutes or so just giving you a sense of what the OneTen Coalition is all about and how we're trying to get to do our work. You're actually going to be hearing from others on this panel who are big-time OneTen collaborators, including Alex Kaplan and IBM, who have been essential to our work. So at its core, OneTen is a coalition of now 60 companies who have committed themselves to hiring, promoting, and advancing 1 million Black talent who don't yet have 4-year degrees into family-sustaining careers and jobs over the next decade. And effectively, the companies are committing to a handful of big commitments. One is to actually make jobs available for Black talent who don't have 4-year degrees. IT jobs, sales jobs, finance jobs, HR jobs. Those jobs for us have to have 4 characteristics in order for those jobs to count for purposes of the OneTen journey. One, we're talking about jobs that pay a living wage. We use the living wage calculator that MIT has designed to determine what that is in the metropolitan markets around the country. 2, these are jobs that cannot require as a gateway a 4-year degree. One might get a 4-year degree on his or her way to on his or her way through the company's journey, but it can't be a gateway to the job. 3, these are jobs that require less than 5 years experience for one to be competitive. And then 4, these are jobs that are not at risk of being automated out of existence. Any jobs with these 4 characteristics are the jobs that count for purposes of the OneTen journey. The beautiful thing that we're seeing is these companies are putting IT jobs and sales jobs and HR jobs and finance jobs and manufacturing jobs. They're finding that there are a lot of jobs in a lot of categories that actually work for this journey. That's the beauty of this. Anyone who tells you we don't have high quality, good, stable jobs for folks who do not yet have 4-year degrees is not looking at what these companies are doing, because they are showing us that this is doable. The second commitment, though, that the companies are making is they are actually committing to looking at all of their job requisitions and removing the 4-year degree requirement where it's not related to the skills necessary to do the work, and focusing on the skills, right? Moving to a skills based approach to doing this work. I'm going to pick on IBM again. 4, 5, 6 years ago, IBM discovered that over 80% of their jobs on paper required a 4-year degree for one to compete for them. Now, after doing the hard work of looking at their jobs, of assessing the skills needed on day one and the skills that will be needed on day 301, they've moved from having over 80% of their jobs requiring a 4-year degree to 50%. Alex, I probably stole your thunder. I apologize for that. But it is the kind of work that the companies are committing to. We know that when you do the hard work of really looking at the skills components of the jobs, and you also then say, what are the multiple pathways through which one can acquire those skills, that the number of places where you can remove a 4-year degree requirement expands. And that's what these companies are committing to. Third thing they're committing to, and this is another powerful component of the work, is actively engaging and cultivating and participating in a community of practice that the companies are constituting. So we've got 60 companies who come together at least 4 times a year, and they focus at the CEO level and the CHRO level on the jobs that we have to do to be great in this journey. Being really great when it comes to skills-based hiring and promotion. Being great when it comes to creating career pathways that are transparent for folks, that bring them, yes, into the company and then up through the company, if you will. Being great at utilizing apprenticeships as a source or a vehicle to source new talent from different places, and upskilling and preparing talent that's incumbent for new opportunities. All of the things that we need to be great at, we've got companies at different places along the spectrum that we're learning from one another and emulating and repeating and collaborating on, and frankly pushing one another and holding one another accountable. The community of practice piece here, the ability to change corporate practice and corporate behavior via the community, is proving to be powerful, and a commitment that all of the companies are making. The third commitment that the companies are making is, let's stay at this for a long enough period of time to truly effect transformation. Change in the companies, partnering with Black talent to change the trajectory of their lives and the lives of their families. And I'm a naive optimist, changing our country for the better. And then the last piece that the companies are committing to, in addition to putting jobs on the table, they are committing financial resources. They're making an annual contribution of value to the actual operations of the coalition. So In my lifetime, I've never seen a commitment to this kind of work, creating family sustaining career opportunities for Black talent of this scale and this magnitude ever. Now, I will also concede I'm still young, so we may have more commitments this big yet to come, but this is a huge commitment. The way that this work is getting done is this is a team sport. It's about building and scaling an ecosystem. Ecosystem starts with demand, the companies, but it then cascades to the talent development industry, organizations that are educational institutions and boot camps and military transition programs and HBCUs and other 2-year schools who can equip this talent for success in these companies. They are bought into and aggregated as well as part of the ecosystem. The third piece of the ecosystem is obviously Black talent. Some of that Black talent is actually sourced through their relationships with the talent developers, the schools and the boot camps. But a lot of it will be sourced through our relationships with other organizations, NAACP, faith-based organizations, direct marketing, and the like. And then the fourth piece of the ecosystem is, look, we need hard skills, we need soft skills, we need other supports, coaches, mentors, sponsors, childcare, transportation, mental wellness. Organizations, some of the companies do a lot of this already, so leveraging that, but we're also bringing third-party organizations to the table as well. This ecosystem of players is getting knit together and scaled through a technology platform that IBM has been essential in helping us launch and essential in helping us refine, as well as doing it in markets around the country. Right now, we've picked 25 places where there's an overlap of supply and demand, and we're knitting this ecosystem together face to face, organization to organization, person to person, and scaling it. I'm going to stand down now. I'm excited, as you might imagine. I'm looking forward to this journey. And at the end of the day, I'm a naive optimist. I believe we can change lives and the trajectory of our American democratic experiment through this work. And I'm excited to be partnering with it with a lot of other organizations and people. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you.
Hi, thanks, Maurice. I'm Deb Everhart, Chief Strategy Officer at Credential Engine. I'm going to change the tone here a little bit, but on the same vein of important work. I want to provide concrete information about credential and skill transparency and how we can use linked open data as a public good. So what do we mean by credential and skill transparency? In short, it's a way of making sense of massive amounts of data from numerous sources. Based on Credential Engine's research, there are nearly 1 million credentials offered in the US, not only degrees and certificates, but also badges, micro-credentials, diplomas, apprenticeships, certifications, licenses, and this is only getting more complex. But it's hard to find reliable information about credentials and the skills they represent. So we're working with states and federal agencies and national associations and hundreds of other organizations to make detailed information about credentials and skills publicly available in a clear and consistent data language. Together with our partners, we're actually achieving this vision of empowering people with timely and trusted information about credentials and skills, and that in turn illuminates the connections and the pathways. We have many partners, including 29 state agencies and regional associations, which is a number that's growing very quickly, federal agencies, the US Navy, national organizations, including our colleagues here at the National Governors Association, SHIO, ACE, ACRO, EDUCAUSE, leading higher education institutions such as WGU and Ivy Tech, industry associations such as National Retail Federation and NOCTI, and we thank our funders for supporting this work. So let me just take a minute to introduce you to Credential Engine for those of you who aren't yet engaged in this work. Credential Engine is a nonprofit whose mission is to map the credential landscape with clear and consistent information. We advocate for policies and practices to support credential and skill transparency. And so for those practices, we provide openly available technologies that include an infrastructure for organizing credential and skill data, a common data language, which is the Credential Transparency Description Language, or CTDL, open source technologies that allow anyone to access credential and skill information, including, importantly, being able to search, discover, and reuse skills from hundreds of providers. We're vendor agnostic, and our technologies are designed to enable an open marketplace of products and services. So credential and skill transparency requires technology because we need structures. We need a way to combine data from numerous sources. The Credential Transparency Description Language is an open source, machine-readable schema with over 750 terms for describing and connecting credentials and skills. We provide tools for organizations to map their credential and skill information to CTDL and publish it to the registry, and the registry stores open public CTDL data. It supports linked open data connections and contextualization among these many different data sources. The registry provides APIs for consuming CTDL data so that developers can create products and services that use it. The data in the registry is available for many different purposes, including it being available for anyone to link to it and connect to these huge graphs of data. For example, digital credentials can link to data in the registry for rich metadata that illuminate the meaning and value of the credentials, such as the skills they contain and their occupational alignments. The skills themselves can have rich descriptions of their context and value using CTDL. And an individual can follow a link from a credential they've earned to discover its transfer value, its connections to other credentials, where it fits into pathways. So this data that's published in CTDL is expanding rapidly in breadth and in depth, and this really helps provide the rich data that's needed to support state goals. We are right now at a pivotal point to bring together the initiatives you're seeing today with linked open data as a public good. Working together, we can turn specific instances of these solutions into strong networked communities at scale. We can take isolated bodies of data and make them exponentially more valuable through connections to global linked data. And we can use this data to build the ecosystems that empower people with equitable, connected learning and career opportunities. Indiana is an example of a state that's accomplishing goals using CTDL linked open data. And you'll also hear from two other leading states, Alabama and New Jersey. And there are lots of states and regions doing this work. State leaders in Indiana recognize that advancing credential transparency statewide would break down the data silos and give people in their state more equitable access to reliable information. And Indiana's partnership with Credential Engine includes the Indiana Commission for Higher Education for data from colleges and universities, the Department of Workforce Development for credentials approved to be on their eligible training provider list, the Professional Licensing Agency for licensing board, licenses themselves, and importantly, the licensure pass rates, the Department of Education for secondary programs that are dual credit and connections to high schools and technical and career centers, and the Governor's Workforce Cabinet. So they're all publishing to the registry this huge body of data that will be the foundation for credential and skill ecosystems. Together, we're building powerful learn and work ecosystems with people at the center. These ecosystems are even more powerful when they're based on open skills data, so that learners and workers are empowered to use their skills as currency across digital credentials, jobs, and pathways. Let's look at a few examples that make CTDL more concrete. So this is a digital credential from Digital Promise that's part of Equitable Pathways. The alignment link in this badge from Digital Promise connects to humanly readable and machine actionable data in CTDL that can show a person and show a system how this credential connects to other credentials, skills-based pathways, and more. This is an example from Alabama of how the description of a job, which is part of a high-value pathway, is connected to the CTDL data for a credential. Wallets provide digital structure where a person can securely store and manage verified learning and employment records, or LERs. In order to achieve the power of skills-based learn and work ecosystems, people really need to be able to see and communicate their own skills in their own digital credentials and job records. So when these skills are represented as linked open data in CTDL, they're part of the data infrastructure that connects what's in someone's wallet to pathways and learning and employment opportunities. This is an example of a learning and employment pathway in Washington. Education Design Lab's work through the Community College Growth Engine Fund is supporting community colleges developing these micro-credential pathways really designed to meet this urgent demand for skills-focused, market-driven education. So in this pathway, CTDL provides core value in order to be able to map and describe and make searchable and navigable these micro-credential pathways because they're combining data components from numerous sources. And of course, none of us are starting from scratch when we build rich data sets of skills and occupational data. The U.S. Department of Labor ONET occupational skills and industry frameworks are available in CTDL. And the same is true for the NICE, National Cybersecurity Frameworks from the Department of Commerce, and national industry associations like the National Retail Federation. They're all publishing their skills and were offered their certifications to the registry. So when leading institutions like WGU and our many collaborators in the Open Skills Network do this hard work of illuminating curriculum and defining their credentials using open skills, they can use CTDL to provide meaningful data at the level of the individual skills. So this data can include, among other things, the occupational alignments, employer recognition, relevance in industry certifications, and alignments to other skills. Ivy Tech has published rich CTDL connections among data about credentials, skills, courses, programs, industries, occupations, sectors, more. So these are all concrete examples of rich data that powers these connections in the learn and work ecosystems. People are empowered with wallets that contain verifiable records of their skills. Their learning and employment records include linked open data embedded in their digital credentials and job achievements. And so those of us building these ecosystems can search, discover, and reuse open skills and other data so that education and occupational data sets are usefully combined. Together, we can build these equitable skills-based pathways so that individuals can navigate to education and career opportunities. This is not abstract. We can achieve these goals today. So it's time for you to learn more, advocate for credential and skill transparency, and build solutions that are using CTDL linked open data as a public good. And tomorrow, my colleague Emily Raffel, sorry about that, Emily, who leads our state partnerships, will share more concrete information. So, thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Deb. That was very helpful. And so I'm Kathleen deLaski, CEO of the Education Design Lab, and you heard Chris Lowry talk about our work earlier about creating micro pathways. And I'll be giving actually a specific talk on that tomorrow, but I was asked to do something different today. I was asked to really talk about the power of micro-credentials as the root, as the foundation, as the Rosetta Stone, choose whatever term you like, the currency of this emerging digital skills ecosystem. But I did want to explain a little bit about us. So we are a national nonprofit that works really on the ground with systems, with states, with colleges, with employers to really design these pathways and solutions from the learner's point of view or from the worker's point of view or the user. So in the case of employers trying to create solutions like OneTen, we might be working from the employer's point of view. but we're working in 9 states specifically on skills-based micro pathways. So I'll be talking more about that today. But so today, sorry, more about that tomorrow. Today, I'm really asked to talk about why do we call this micro credentials specifically the secret weapon of a visible skills economy. So if you could show the first slide, I really like to start this story with a micro credential, because you have to see it at its unit level, because it is really changing the unit of learning from knowledge to skills. And this little circular thing that we've been pushing now for about 8 or 9 years. A lot of folks have been pushing badging for a long time, but now the infrastructure, as Deb just described earlier, has really caught up with the vision, and we can really begin to produce the wallets that become the new resume, that follow the learner through. And so if we start at the skills level, at the credential level, this one is a collaboration micro-credential that we created with the Central Maine Community College. So we're working with several colleges in Maine to create a common currency around soft skills or 21st century skills. And so you start with an individual unit of collaboration, and we're trying to define it and credential it and assess it in a way that is that can be standardized across the country. We're working across colleges and institutions in many states. But on the next slide, I try to demonstrate. So this is what the learner gets or sees when they're looking at their badge, or this is what the employer can access digitally. They can type in collaboration. They're looking for collaborators, but they can also type in any of these sub-competencies. So it represents, the micro-credential represents a verified competency, not just that you took a course, but that you actually have mastered the thing, the competency. And it also assesses the competencies at the sub-competency level. So active listening could be something that the employer is looking for. And of course, as Deb mentioned, it's machine readable and verifiable. So this makes it visible, throughout the ecosystem. And so let's go to the next slide, where I'm trying to represent the ecosystem of the future, right? So we have the resume being replaced by this learner skills wallet, and you're going to hear probably the first biggest wallet pilot in the country, in Indiana. You'll hear about that today. But we imagine a future where the learner can gather micro credentials as representation of skills and cluster them, think about ways they have the visibility of pathways for themselves, and they can showcase themselves to employers without knowing those employers, and vice versa. The employer can look for people who have these skills, and it becomes a very efficient way of aligning supply and demand. So on the next slide, I add the loop, the 360 loop, really, that gives the employer a way to signal the skill pathways they need. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with the micro pathway that Chris showed you in the first session. And I'll show one in a minute, but we're trying to extend the visibility both to the learner and to the employer, and create a roadmap or blueprint for the learning providers, like the colleges that are trying to build the paths. And these can get stacked, but the learner can see what the possibilities are. So if you go to the next slide, this shows the visibility from the employer side, where you can post for and look for people who have active listening. You can go right down to that sub skill of collaboration. You can find those people, and this is a way for a learner or worker applicant to explore, to see what the possibilities would be if I do this micro pathway, or start this stack. So on the next slide, I just wanted to give a sense of how employers are beginning to, this is a little bit of an older study, but I think from the Gallup study you heard about earlier, and a couple of new ones are coming out that really show employers are embracing this as a way, and they understand the thing. They're starting to understand the things they have to do to showcase and signal. And we need to actually create new credentials that represent readiness, job readiness for different roles, particularly high demand roles. And so on the next slide, we begin to. I'm showing this. This is what Chris was talking about earlier, and Deb just showed one of these too. But this represents for us. We're really excited about the micro pathway, particularly in that it standardizes a new credential. So it's not just the pieces, the micro credentials that feed into a new credential, but it creates a set of proxies or signals, currency really, that are less than a degree, but more than just any one of these individual certifications. And we've created a set of criteria for these micro pathways that I'll talk about tomorrow. But it gives the signal here. You can look ahead to say, if I earn this certificate, I can get this kind of a wage gain. And then on the next slide, it also, you can look at the micro pathway and see where else you can go with your education path, which is really critical, so that we're not just dead-ending people or cul-de-sacing them by giving them a lot of opportunities for their 730,000 micro credentials out there. But how do I put them together? How do I think about them as the new degree? And this begins to show you this is a new pathway that Ivy Tech has created, and we have 30 of these now from our first year of the work with Community College Growth Engine Fund that you can see more of tomorrow. Next slide. But so then to kind of summarize on this, from the state's point of view, you have a role to play in this, right? In how do you help create the Rosetta Stone or the currency for the skills-based economy, so that you can see, so that learners and workers on one side and employers on the others can really can envision the promise of this, and it actually delivers. So on the next slide, I summarize sort of the why, which is, we call the 3 E's. It's economic growth, because studies have shown that like $1.2 trillion in lost revenue is coming over the next 10 years if we can't fix the skills mismatch gap. And then equity. I think you've heard a lot about the equity possibilities of going to a skills-based economy. For one, we really like the social networks and professional networks, that the barrier that gets broken down, because you can be seen by employers who you don't even know. You don't have to know people, and it doesn't matter where you went to school or who you know. It's what can you do, and that's the exciting part of it. And then the efficiency. I've got one thing to say on this is, please think about adopting, stepping into national frameworks as opposed to creating your own, because that, a state framework is good, a national framework is even better. But don't let your colleges each create a potpourri of lots of different credentials. And then finally, my last slide, if I have time. I don't know if I have time to show this, but I wanted to just kind of show you what we saw as 6 steps from a state's point of view to get to a skills-based economy. And we will be talking more tomorrow about the last step: establish a fast-track mechanism to get learners into employer-validated credentials within less than a year. That's sort of the piece that we're taking on, because we really see community colleges in particular, and those systems and these micro pathways as the track into a sort of your first step on the way to really solving particularly the middle skills gaps that you're seeing in your states. So with that, I think I'm supposed to turn it over to Boris and Alex.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kathleen. I think that was really helpful, and it's sort of a good segue to our next discussion. And Boris, thanks for joining me here, because what I wanted to talk about is, the work that the United States Department of Defense is doing in this area. And I think the previous 2 presentations gave us a good grounding in, I'll call it, sort of the mechanics and the philosophy and the policy of credentials. So let's talk about it in real life now. And Boris, I know that you've been doing a lot of work on this in terms of making it easier for service members and veterans to get jobs as they make the transition, and to bring forward with them the skills that they developed while they were on active service. So Boris, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how the military is approaching this topic, and why this became a priority for all of you.
Thanks so much, Alex. And again, I want to thank all of our fellow participating speakers, and I want to thank the NGA for allowing us to speak, because at the end of the day, it is a partnership. This, you know, every service member at the end of the day is a citizen, and they will go back home. Right? It doesn't matter if they serve 4 years or 30 plus years. I had the privilege of serving our nation for almost 13 years, and I continue to serve as a government employee. So that being said, there is a responsibility by us, the department, in some ways, to make sure we provide that pathway home. So
Boris, are you still with us?
or have GEDs as such, and we give them skill sets, we give them competencies, however individuals want to refer to it here, and we grow and develop them and make them proficient in a technical or specialized skill set. And that should not be as hard to transfer to back home to society as it has been. They don't always get degrees per se, or credentials in a traditional sense. We've made significant strides to that extent, but we are continuously trying to improve that. So we look at technology as an enabler, not some, not so much as a one, all-inclusive situation. So Alex, to your point, with all the speakers here, we looked at CTDL, ASN, and other ways we can improve the outcomes for our service members and improve those variabilities. But we AI, for instance, comes in handy to equivocate and help resolve those situations between faculty outcomes, and help faculty make those decisions for between different states, for instance. And with the work with verifiable credentials, improves that outcome in the future. So the identity stack, for instance, in the long run, whereas was mentioned with the digital wallet, for instance, correct? So individuals themselves, for instance, like yourself and myself, will own our own credentials, correct? So we've made a conscious decision, like many others, I believe, and it is a state's issue as much as even a federal, but more so states, just like a driver's license is a credential, correct? So that could be very easily part of a digital wallet, even a passport. So we at the federal level, sorry for the noise, at the federal level are working with the GSA, Treasury, and even the IRS. From a state, oh, somebody speaking, but real quick, we also have to address the policies. So from policy standpoints, the legislations, the executive orders from the state governors. So as we are looking at skills-based economy, or how to improve economic output, I praise the states, obviously, because there's only so much we can do at the federal level. So when the service members do come home, the veterans do come home, and even spouses, more importantly, because they're there constantly, and we move service members always, it is critical for the states to recognize that it starts with the policy or legislation. So the states that are more welcoming or have mobility, portability, and allow interstate compacts, for instance. But more importantly, I always look at things like licensure, state licensure. So if I can drive a car in Ohio and I can take my driver license to another state, what's the difference between the
I'm here.
All right, sorry about that. Next question, yes.
Yeah, so Boris, just talk to us about some of the lessons learned. I know you've had strong involvement in the Meal Gears project. You've been working with the states for quite some time, and I think we'd all be curious to get your perspective on what you've learned through this journey and what would be important takeaways for our state leaders who are participating today.
Sure, not a problem. So Meal Gears is really an evolution from COOL, so credentialing opportunities online, for those individuals who might be or might not be aware of the DoD efforts at large in the credentialing space. So Meal Gears is powered by COOL, but it is also very much informed by legislation and various state rules, but also federal. So the Meal Gears effort initiated in 2014 from various efforts in recognizing the technology can enable us to do more, better ways to enable our service members to get to their answers. And to Kathleen's points, right, those pathways. So the journey mapping for our service members and identifying skill sets, more so credentials. I think a lot of times we are overusing the term credential for independent skills or competencies, and versus really looking at what is the definition of a credential. So credential can be a certificate, certification, licensure, apprenticeship, correct completion. So it's a completion of something. When we start tagging that a credential identifies that you know how to have active communication skills, well, that's a diluting that. So we're then diluting potentially the term credential at large. It's very similar to what we can do, what has happened in higher education in the past, right? When there's courses like under 100. So are we then basically saying that is that a micro credential? And how do we define that? Because policymakers, I will now use the Department of Defense as an example, major policymakers have a hard time already following the term credential. Now we're adding the terms micro credentials. So what are we actually trying to say with all of that? So the other element that where states were very helpful in defining that is they actually entered the stage and they were leading in this space. So as we see the state of Indiana leading the charge with higher education compact, CBAN network, competency-based education networks. Take individuals with no higher education, we give them intense training, and within 6 months or so on average, they're out there doing great things for our nation. So again, going back to the flip side is how do we then return them back to our community with that identified training? So I think that's been the last 70 years question mark, and that's where Meal Gears, I think, ultimately is trying to answer that question from our end. So Meal Gears is one tool of many, but I think our R&D work there collectively with many partners like yourself and others, what we did last year, for instance, many higher ed partners, is we basically went through the LER processing, right? Maybe not fully, but we, in essence, designed an LER for DoD. And that's a big thing for states and many stakeholders here and partners is an LER has certain parameters, right? There's we do both, correct? So for us, it's important to have both parameters of employment and the learning that occurs within service, which can be also experiential. So I've heard the discussion today, for instance, and it's education, but again, it's traditional education, right? I haven't, and this is important for the states, I believe, too, when we're talking about the trillions of dollars, but we're already talking about even billions of dollars of economic output on a year basis today. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about current economics, and to the point that Maurice mentioned, the annotation of education has been overwhelmed even from 2000, but as a historian or a student of economics myself, it started in the 1960s, right? We needed to define individuals coming back from the Vietnam War and how we can define blue collar, white collar work. So the definition.
Sounds good.
The
Well,
4 year.
thank you. Great. Hey, Boris, thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective. I think that was really helpful. I think that, one of my main takeaways from the collaboration we've done on Mill Gears has really been around, one, the rigor which you all have taken, and two, the fact that you've actually built an operational learning and employment record solution. And, I think we'll learn more today about the Indiana Achievement Wallet, but I do want to highlight the important work that the Mill Gears program has contributed to the national dialogue. It is a real system. It connects people with jobs, which is the whole point of having a learning and employment record infrastructure for the United States. And, I'm very excited about adding that, seeing that added to the overall ecosystem for the work that we're all doing here around making it easier for people to find work. And it also points out the fact that there will be multiple learning and employment record systems, technologies, both in the United States as well as globally, and that those all need to interoperate together, because from the user perspective, it's going to be, it just has to be easy and simple so that they can use it, understand the skills they've learned, share them with those that are interested in looking the skills or making decisions about college admissions or employment or for whatever purpose that person wants. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody. And Boris, again, thank you for sharing that point of view. And I'm going to turn it back to you all.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you to all of our rapid fire expert panelists. Thank you for joining us. We are going to learn more about the Indiana Achievement Wallet, as Alex noted. We're going to dive into that so that you can see this ecosystem and the work that's created through these types of collaborations in some real time, and hear from the folks who are putting in this work on the ground.